So, hi there, all you people of Jacobs University. May I ask you something? Have you heard about the grand unified theory of communication and influence? No, I guess not, because I came up with it. So I did so while preparing talks about communication for science and tech people. And from now on, let's call it Gucci. What is Gucci about? Well, I believe that there is a universal set of principles, rules, and methods which apply whenever communication is taking place in any form. So what works in one channel often works in another channel. What works in journalism works in academic writing. What works in advertising works in infographics. What works in movies works in presentations. But to become a really skilled communicator, you should study, apply, and cross the borders of different modes of communication all the time. I want to introduce a metaphor. Look at communication as a toolbox which is full of amazing things. Rhetoric, storytelling, spoken word, written word, visual language, journalism, advertising, PR, literature, music, drama, YouTube, stand-up comedy, social media. Something that I am conveying to my client is this: don't let yourself be held back by the conventions of your profession. Instead, dive into the toolbox and pick out the tools that can help you get across data, facts, analysis, opinion, emotions, attitudes, trust, and everything else that is floating back and forth during a communication process. So, many of you here are science people. You can, for example, when you prepare an academic talk, take some inspiration from a musical composition. Or you can study the spreads of magazines and newspapers when you design a scientific poster. Or you can go through some seasons of Game of Thrones if you want to join the power struggle at the faculty. I want to introduce you to some new friends of mine who have understood what Gucci is all about. This is Randy McIntosh, neuroscientist and musician from Toronto. This is Agata Kuzik, stem cell scientist and musician from Warsaw. And finally, Michela Vignoli, who is an open scientist, expert, and musician from Vienna. They all love science, they all love music. And what they have in common are the two P's. The first P is for passion. As a musician, they are well aware of the emotional power of music. And they know that the more they put in, the more they move the hearts and minds of their audience. The second P is for professionalism. As musicians, they have learned that there are so many people out there who, when it comes to communication, have developed amazing skills and smart thinking. And these people are rarely seen in the corridors of science. Let's zoom in on the corridors of science. The scientific community, unfortunately, still nurtures a conservative and constrained communications culture. Science people are, of course, very smart, but they are not always that clever when it comes to getting the messages across. This is true for scientific peer-to-peer communication, and this is true for science dissemination. Let me demonstrate some pet peeves. Pet peeve number 1, the use of lecterns in auditoriums. A safe way of turning interesting people into talking heads who bore their audience to sleep. Pet peeve number 2, the editorial design of scientific articles. These are YouTube movies explaining how to read scientific papers. As a communications person, I think there must be a serious problem somewhere where when you need special training to find the interesting information. Pet peeve number 3, the cognitive hell of scientific poster sessions, also known as the mosh pit of networking or the chamber of horrors of information design. All this said, I have some good news for you. Things are rapidly changing for the better. I'm not particularly worried about the future. You see, the students and the early career scientists of today, they have grown up in a totally different world than the generations before them. And many of them are very eager to start exploring the possibilities of the toolbox of communication. As we speak, something is emerging, which I refer to a new wave of communicators of science. Let me show you some interesting trends. Trend number 1, taking the elevator pitch approach. Today there are several events where young scientists learn how to present their science in a brief, clear, and engaging way. Trend number 2, developing the scientific poster format. Here you see a German project which is a totally digital and interactive poster format. Trend number 3, the use of visual language. I'm especially fond of so-called visual abstracts. Trend number 4, setting up personal websites. It's a very effective way for scientists to broaden the interface with the world outside. And finally, the fusion of science and performative arts. This is my favorite. It's a yearly dance competition called Dance Your PhD. Look it up, it's wonderful. So, a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to be part of this movement. And I wanted to include some brilliant young people that I had met during my talks and my workshops. And I started thinking about a network where we should bring like-minded together, where we should disseminate professional skills, and we should inspire, engage, and encourage. All in order to promote change. And so, in 2013, Christina was born. Christina is today a website, a Facebook feed, a Twitter feed, but most of all, it's a platform for the intellectual interaction between a growing group of extraordinary people. And I will finish my talk with sharing our vision. Our vision is an academical communication culture which acknowledges the value of personal engagement and emotional impact, and is actively seeking out professional methods of other domains, such as industry and media. I think it's a privilege to live in this time of change and upheaval. Out with the old, in with the new. Thank you very much.